Malvern Books. So glad y'all could join us here today for the reading by these three very interesting and inspired poets. So we're thrilled to have them here with us. Our first reader of the day will be Carol Hamilton. Carol is a writer and storyteller born in Oklahoma, where but she did teach elementary school in Connecticut and many other places around the country until she went back to Oklahoma and became poet laureate. So good thing you went back home. Yes. I bet they were glad to have you. And she received the Oklahoma Book Award for a chapbook of poetry, Once the Dust, in 1992. We have 3 of her books here today, in case you would like to see those. And so we welcome Carol Hamilton. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always fun to come to Oklahoma because we have a really close relationship in the last few years between Oklahoma poets and Texas poets. And that's really kind of unusual because this is my dropsy day. I just dropped all my poems and got them out of order a minute ago, and now they're back in order, but I'm dropping books. At any rate, we have the Scissortail Festival in Ada, Oklahoma, and lots of Texas poets come up, and we come down for the Scott's Texas Poetry Calendar and for the Austin International Festival, and we've just really developed bonds between the two states. So it's just wonderful to be here with all of you, and Sarah and David have been friends. David not as long as Sarah, but it's just wonderful to be with you all. When I read poetry, I like to read often more narrative poems because poetry is such concentrated language, and when you listen, we want you to listen to an image, and then you kind of go off on your own dreams, and then you don't get back into the poem till the very end, and you kind of wonder what you missed. So quite a few of these are going to be narrative. The first one is called Hats. And maybe you've noticed that in England, they still really like those big, flamboyant hats. And if you've never been to a special event over there, you've certainly seen royal weddings where everyone wears them. Well, I was visiting a friend in North Berwick in East Lothian in Scotland a few years ago, and she wanted to model her hats for me. So this is a poem about hats. Nancy modeled the one she bought, eager for the reunion up north from her coastal flat. The froth and piled high confections left me aghast, but hiding it. Did such extremities ever cross the sea? The Queen once disappeared behind a congressional podium, all but her hat. They say the milliner's art began in Milan. Its Baroque period stretches on in England still. My children used to play with my darling hats after the fashion went out of fashion. Mine were all berets, caps, or that blue-brimmed straw that framed my face. Today I don a hood in wet and wind, my features lost in folds of fabric. I adored those hats, long gone like a scorned lover. And didn't I once wear bell-bottoms, mini-skirts, and a head of hair puffed up like a cobra's fierce face? Nancy will be elegant, confident, despite my sham approval. I'm sorry I did not like her hats, but I had to pretend I did. This one is a story that was told to me, and Sarah was with me at the Scissortail Festival by a friend of a friend, and it's about her going barefoot with her her sister in the summer, barefoot, and her sister had tough feet, and she didn't, but she had to do everything her sister did. It's called Yellow Striped Summer. Her big sister had tough feet, an asset in a barefoot world. Their mother set the rules, shoes only shed at 80 degrees. The girls watched the thermometer for any ascent of red. I'll just start it over, Scott.
I am so sorry.
David,
nobody ever calls me on this phone. It's off.
Okay.
I apologize, Carol.
That's all right. Yellow Striped Summer. Her big sister had tough feet, an asset in a barefoot world. Their mother set the rules, shoes only shed at 80 degrees. Two girls watched the thermometer for any ascent of red. And she had to do everything her sister did. Though stubble of grass prickled, shards of glass hurt, hot pavement seared the bottoms of her tender feet. Encased in wavers of scorching air, their thin gingham dresses, sweaty, stained, outlining their lean little girl bodies. They popped hot tar bubbles in the street for the acrid black scent and the sound, a satisfying snap. To cross streets and parking lots, she leaped from yellow stripe to yellow stripe, or tightrope balanced along a straight yellow trail, a scarecrow dance over hot asphalt. She followed her toughened heroine inch by inch. She measured out endurance, learned life lessons in suffering for love. She would not complain, but she pondered mysteries, like why their mother made them clean away the grit before stepping on her rugs. Were bare feet dirtier than the soles of shoes? Those stifling afternoons she was busy traversing an inexplicable universe that left her hopping from one foot to the other between philosophy and frolic. This is a little shorter one, and this one is, oh no, this isn't what I was going to read next, but it's all right. I like to read this one in Texas because we Texas and Oklahoma poets have a little more of a challenge in finding appropriate images and metaphors, I think, and you'll see what I mean. It's called The Famous Poets Live in Lovely Places. I read their images, their metaphors. They must make more money than I do. They feel the gnaw of beavers in their forests, all Arcadian. Hear seals' fierce cries in the bay, hanging like a love cry's echo, rippling off through waves of unseen air. Smell the ripe berries clogged with sweetness in autumn. I must write of squash bugs, furry okra, mosquitoes, and the scorching winds of midsummer. Some say art was born of hardship, but I wouldn't bet my cowboy boots on it. We just have to live with that. This one is in the new book that I brought. It arrived the day I was leaving home, and it's called Such Deaths, and this is one of the ones that's in it. And it's a little shorter, and it's a little more about, at my stage of life at any rate, how I'm looking at life. How I knit together this and that. I am the woman who carried people across the Mississippi before the first bridge. She rowed her canoe through Minnesota, cold. I go back and forth, as we all do, simply stitching the torn fabric together to carry out the task for a bit longer. The hidden flesh and icy waters wait where they have always waited. But remember how we darned holes in worn stockings, weaving the threads to last for a while? I love to garden, and I have a lot of poems about my yard and garden, and this one's called Volunteer Peach Tree. Its trunk is on my side of the chain link fence, but its heavy branches poked over his grass as well. Last year, I plucked bites of sunshine from among that gloss of green leaves. With good pruning, I prepared for a few more tastes of paradise this year. But late March, every blossom that dared the gray sky turned into tiny globes of ice like beads of cloisonne. Red buds and peach blossoms and Bradford pear flowers and limb and branch and twig turned to glamorous glitter before they fell down. He said I would have no peaches this year. I spaced the tiny green globs anyway, and sticky deformities grew on each blossom end. Yesterday, I found one half-bruised fruit and saw another peachy-toned and high up. I ate the good half, dropped the pit. My crops are usually minuscule anyway, but just a taste or two of something real, keeps me out in the sun, weeding, turning soil for hours. Soon I will taste ripe figs. I also have a little problem with bees. Some years I have bees and several years I don't have bees, and when they come, I'm just in heaven. So this is called Of Bees in Summer. I know next to nothing except of 4 years when none came. But this year, the old Apian friends brought their friends of all races and sizes and fields of competence. We worked in happy harmony, shared a green tunnel of cucumber vines. Big fuzzy ones guarded the circle of zinnias in the front yard. But their attacks were all mock. A neighbor who grew up with bees said you can become friends with them. Let them land and sit a while on skin. I'm only an acquaintance, and all I ask for is not intimacy, but just this one miracle, the return of such migrants. And I, not a hard taskmaster, will work beside them, praising all the while this alchemy of goodness, and how grace comes when we have nearly given up. And I'm going to do one more little one about the yard. I have a terrible battle going on all the time with dandelions. So this one is called War on Dandelions. I know they're pretty, but in the summer they just keep popping up and you have to mow about twice as often. So this year I was out there digging each one out and pouring vinegar in, and this is how the war went. War on Dandelions. The pretty devils smirk up at me right after my shower. My back still aches from cutting out the morning's crop, spraying strong vinegar on the roots. 2 hours maybe? New ones are chuckling, and I remember long ago. The children and I drove away so pleased with our all-green lawn. Came home later to drop-jaw sight, little yellow faces everywhere. I bought sprayings for no plant pests, but no bees either. And yes, their fuzzy heads are pretty, but their sprung-free bald pates midsummer triple the mullings. I won a few skirmishes, even did a victory lap, held a few parades. Still the outcome is uncertain. Perhaps I should be a gracious loser like Robert E., tip my hat and ride away with dignity and tact. But when the sun rises, and I swear, not yet, not yet. Went out there and battle them again. Okay, I'm going to read one from a couple of the other books I bought, and then I'm going to read from the new book a couple of poems. And now I'll be. One of my books is called Lexicography, and that poem about the Oklahoma and Texas poets having used our kind of images is in this book. And this one is about the women of the Bible, and it's called Largely Unnamed. You maybe have noticed that a lot of the women in the Bible are not named at all. The women of the Bible, the daughter of Jairus, Lot's wife, Simon's mother-in-law, the woman taken in sin. Here in the shadows at stage's edge, we wait for recognition. You felt our touch of even your inanimate garment. On the day Adam named the animals, we stood there waiting, still uncreated. Under the cross we wept. We still hold these jars of ointments and vessels of spice we have kept ready for use. I have a well-thumbed dictionary here, and surely among all those words there is one for me, woman. It is not sufficient. Say it just once for me, then I shall practice the syllables hour by hour by hour, the accents of holy lips, the consonants crisp, the vowels full, the rolling R's with cadences to enliven the birth of light. We know there is one for each, and we are still waiting, listening for a day noisy with nomenclature. I have a lot of little chapbooks on various characters that I fall in love with, and this one is about Peter the Great. And I just really do fall in love with them, and I think they're just wonderful, but then they have horrible things about them too, everyone, as we all do. And so you kind of hate them too, but I really love them. And I really love Peter the Great, and I'm reading one about Theodore Roosevelt right now, and they had kind of the same kind of personalities. They just had to charge into everything. And so Peter, I have one little poem I'm going to read at the end of the book. When I'm reading biographies and diaries and things, you know, when you get to the end, there's just a few pages and you know they're going to die, but they don't know they're going to die. I just hate that part. But then at the end, I'm so sad when it's all over. So this one speaks of that. Precipitous. This word epitomizes Peter the Great, a coiled spring of curiosity and joy, ever ready to leap into the fray, move all the pawns and bishops and rooks and kings and queens and castles, both black and white, then shout check to history and just charge past the astonished faces of all. His peasants won foreigners' stunned admiration with their harsh cures for illness. A common one, the act of rowing out naked to work up a sweat, followed by a plunge into the icy river water. Peter was his people, unacquainted with moderation. What a romp to follow him. How blank these 4 pages at the end of my book. And these 3 from Such Deaths. My friend Tish came up with me from Oklahoma, and I went to Oaxaca one year for the El Dia de los Muertos. And Tish's husband gave her a Day of the Dead shirt for her birthday the other day, so she wore it today.
Oh, I'm wearing my shirt.
And this book only arrived at my house the day she arrived, so it was just a really nice coincidence that she had it. But I tried to get the publisher to change the title because I thought Such Deaths was so, it might turn people off, but he had the Day of the Dead art on the front, and he wanted it, and I like it. I really like it. So this one is called The Comedians. I cannot remember if we were serious when we talked of the mausoleum. Her little sister had died of scarlet fever and diphtheria, but that did not keep us from dressing death up and tossing her back and forth as a favorite pastime. Her father played us the sinking of the Titanic on her upright piano, rumbles exploding from the instrument's bowels, and we laughed and laughed. She had seen the Phantom of the Opera and had visited a mausoleum and even traveled as far as Missouri and Arkansas. She had been to funerals, looked into caskets, and I shivered. We saw Nazi spies behind every pulled window shade and dug foxholes in the garden. We shot down enemy planes and did war dances to imagine tom-toms. We played Chopin's Funeral March better than our other pieces. We dressed death up and laughed at her garish ways. We still laugh when we write of our struck down dreams. She sends word of a serious illness, jokes that the doctor took it in stride, and the place that they chose to cheer themselves for supper was closed, bereft of another comforter. The spirits pass me, hiss by from their earthy or watery graves, and I rattle bones, shake gourds, pelted within by their dicey seeds. We shed real tears, comforted one another at the funerals of our kittens. Now we send cards and notes of condolence, and occasionally, once in a while, we forget how to laugh. This one is a short one, and it's about a poetry reading I went to in Oklahoma City a long time ago, and it's about the paths we lead as we go through this life. It's called Tea Leaves for an Undesignated Reader. The construction crew girl said she had to write her poem on sheetrock, no paper handy. It was a little love verse, unexceptional in every way, When the ravine behind my Ohio house hatched new snakes, and the hillside writhed with a race to survival, when the shells, all perfect amalgams of calcite crystal and keratin fiber, broke open, each sounded an alarm if I had been listening. We leave tracks as we pass, graphite on gypsum or broken fragments, slithers through mud, some slight alteration to a planet already atilt with its past. And I'm going to end with kind of the theme of the whole Such Deaths book, ephemerality. And I really try to practice living ephemerality. I know Buddhist monks that make these beautiful sand paintings, and then they sweep them up, and in El Dia de los Muertos, they made the papel picado, beautiful, lacy things. If it rains, it's all right. But I'm not so good at it, and I don't think we Americans are so good at it, but that's my goal, and I'll leave you with this challenge to practice ephemerality. Ephemeral. I am trying to practice this art. Many people spend days creating and then let go. I worked on a jigsaw puzzle, cats of every color and breed, worked in the motel room for practice. I knew I could not complete it. The border itself was too large for any available surface, and the time too short. I took it up unfinished, pleased with my wasted efforts, but I cheated. The joined pieces sit in the box, neatly layered, all waiting for completion on a card table at home. The habit of hanging on is pernicious, but I'll think of some more exercises, practice them, and one day, when I have perfected this open-handed kind of life, I will set you free, and I will drift off, a swallowtail lifted on golden edge light. Thank you.